Hello, and my name is Peter Rushmer, and I'm your host today of a Half Dozen Things podcast. A Half Dozen Things is a podcast for business owners and professionals just like you. Whether you're an underdog hungry for success or you're already smashing it but want to continue to level up, we're here each week for you to get insight and learning from the very best in the business. No fluff, no BS, and no self-proclaimed gurus talking about how easy business or life is. Just real, frank, and raw conversations. Hi, I'm joined today by Poonam Anandaraj. She is a chartered physiotherapist and she's the founder of Peak Health Clinics. She joins me today to talk about driver welfare and driver wellbeing and how we can best ensure that those behind the wheel are in the peak physical condition that they can be in to improve on road safety as well. I really do hope you enjoy this session and catch you soon.
Good afternoon, almost 1 minute to, so we're a little bit early getting on here for 12 o'clock. But yeah, my watch has just turned 12 myself. So yeah, good afternoon everyone who's tuning into this live. And hello at any other time for anyone tuning in as well, obviously once we've finished recording it. It's my absolute pleasure to have Poonam join me today from Peak Health Clinics. She's a chartered physiotherapist. I'm going to get her to introduce herself in a moment, but yeah, thank you Poonam, it's amazing. Poonam do quite a bit of networking together, and you know, she's just absolutely fantastic. She's great at what she does, and you know, fantastic reviews. And we were having a bit of a discussion around the fact that I do a lot of transport management and I do a lot of supporting drivers with training and with different areas. And something that we don't focus on enough in the transport sector is around driver health and well-being, and around how best drivers can look after themselves from a physical and mental point of view. So that's what this session's about. We're going to be sharing 5 peak health tips for professional drivers. So yeah, thank you for joining us. I hope you get some value out of it. We're going to be recording the session and also putting it on my podcast, A Half Dozen Things, as well. So yeah, really, really looking forward to hearing from Poonam. So Poonam, are you able to just introduce yourself, please, to anyone watching? Thank you.
Hi, yes, it's absolutely wonderful for you to have me here, Pete. Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be part of your group. I'm Poonam. I'm the owner of Peak Health Clinics, which is a growing concern based in Peterborough, Cambridgeshire, where we look at providing solutions in physiotherapy, acupuncture, health, and wellness. So I actually cover a broad spectrum of conditions. I personally am a chartered physiotherapist, qualified about 25 years ago. Seems a very long time ago now, and I've been using acupuncture in that whole period of time as well. I happened to be in the right place at the right time, so that I got my first bit of acupuncture training within months of me graduating as a chartered physiotherapist. What I find works very, very well is to combine the two modalities of physiotherapy and acupuncture in looking at the overall health provision for people. So I have worked within the NHS. I've done all my rotational work there. I have gained a lot of experience within the hospital trust, but I also have worked privately and now have got a fantastic facility based in Peterborough, just literally off the A1, where we can develop very much of a bespoke solution for individuals.
Amazing. Yeah, you are literally walking distance from A1 services at Peterborough, aren't you? So
absolutely,
yes. Not too far away, based there up in Alton Southgate. So the 5 top tips that we're going to share, Poonam, obviously these are things that you've worked on with people, whether they're drivers or elsewhere as well. But the first tip is around what sort of typical musculoskeletal injuries a driver may have if they drive for long distances. What sort of things would we be likely to expect from drivers with that?
Okay, so I was actually doing a bit of preparation and research for today's talk, and I've got some data based out of both Canada and America, where we have a lot of truck drivers there who cover probably greater distances than what we cover within Britain and the continent. And so their data about driver musculoskeletal injuries is far more robust than what we would have within the UK. And I've used their data, and what they've found in several bits of research, and some as recently produced as just 2 or 3 years ago, is that nearly 3/5 of truck drivers would have a significant, is the word they use, musculoskeletal pain or discomfort within the last 30 days. And the main areas that people seem to be reporting injuries in are their neck, their arms, hands, wrists, and back. So these are the areas when we speak about musculoskeletal zones. Musculoskeletal is medical jargon that refers to conditions around your muscles, your soft tissues, and your bones. So any aches and pains that most people would experience in their day-to-day life that is not trauma-related, not a direct injury or a condition related, will come under musculoskeletal.
Awesome. And so with the guys driving, or guys and ladies, women
Yes.
and men, obviously my experience is that actually there are far more men drivers out there.
Yes.
Out of all the time that we've been delivering training, it's in the single percentage figures that we see women come through. So get out there driving, women. We're not here to put you off at all.
What's fantastic is yesterday I saw somebody over at my local Tesco depot, and she was a female truck driver and did an amazing job getting out of a really tight spot. So go women.
Oh, amazing! Yeah, absolutely. I think that's obviously maybe a discussion for another day, Poonam. But yeah, absolutely, absolutely fantastic. So with drivers, what is it about the role that they're doing in businesses and as part of their everyday life? What is it about the role that's going to cause these physical challenges that they face?
Okay, so I suppose the biggest and most obvious thing that people would think about is the prolonged sitting position that drivers will be in. Certainly we have legislation here within the UK that does need to be followed and complied with that will limit how long a person is going to be able to physically drive for. What is imperative is when you have to take that essential truck stop, get out of your cab and change position. Our bodies are designed for movement, and a lot of our problems develop within our bodies. A lot of problems develop within our bodies. That might be as a truck driver or as an office worker. If we spend time doing what our bodies are not designed to do, we are asking for trouble. So if you're in a prolonged sitting position, what you're going to have, and if I sort of it's very, very easy when you're driving to sort of slump back and end up in a position which, if I turn side on, you might be able to see a bit better. You kind of like end up in a position where you have a chin jutting forwards, slightly overly rounded shoulders, and the shoulders therefore roll inwards, and they can create a condition known as shoulder impingement. So some of the people out there might have already heard of things like shoulder impingement, rotator cuff injuries, and that can be really easily preventable by maintaining a good upright posture in the first place. So making sure that your seat is in a good, comfortable position, making sure that you are appropriately distanced away from the steering will help. Making sure as well that you adjust all your rear view mirrors and all the rest of it is very good. Advice that's come out from the Institute of Advanced Motorists, which obviously doesn't apply necessarily to truck drivers, but to all motorists, is when you get out of a vehicle, you ought to take get your seat and slide it all the way back, or alternatively all the way forwards, so that when you next get into the car, if you remember what it's like when you were first a learner driver, you'd have to get in and make all your adjustments to your seat and to your mirror and everything else, and check everything and double check and triple check it. That's what the Institute of Advanced Motorists wants us to do. They want us to reposition our seat. They want us to reposition our mirrors as well, because that will then set us up into an alert sitting position. As we start driving and as our bodies start to fatigue, we start slumping. So when we get to the point where you can no longer see as clearly out of that rear view mirror, that should be a prompt not to lower the mirror, which is what a majority of people end up doing and kind of like find a comfortable position, but instead to be upright again and to re-prompt back into that upright alert sitting position. The other thing to note is when we're, especially in vehicles, there is an awful lot of vibrational energy that will come through the seats. So if certainly the bigger trucking firms might be able to invest in seats that will dampen the vibrational force. So there might be some people out here who are listening who have heard of something called white hand or white finger syndrome. And that is a well-known condition that occurs when you're using vibrational tools like maybe drills or something. But in a similar way, when you get vibrational effects coming through the body and you're kind of juddering all the way through, you can end up with conditions that can irritate nerve endings and can create a vibrational effect. So long sitting is not a great idea, both for posture as well as the forces that our bodies experience. The other thing as well is when people are doing any task for a period of time, anything longer than 40 minutes actually is what's, so the Institute of Ergonomic Studies will actually suggest that you need to limit any task to 40 minutes, because beyond that, we actually start to lose concentration. And when we're driving for long periods of time and it's a long straight road and might be on cruise control, you start to lose concentration, and mental fatigue can set in quite quickly as well. So it is essential to make sure that you are sitting upright, you're taking in nice deep breaths every so often, so that you're trying to maintain as healthy mental alert state as possible. Again, that will keep the body in physically good shape. I think we'll probably talk in a little while as well about the possibility of doing exercise shortly, and I'll tag that in as well.
Absolutely, yeah. So we've just had a comment come in, Poonam, from Dave Miller on Facebook. He's just said, Poonam, would you also recommend utilisation of things like resistance bands and scapular work exercise to help in terms of corrective or preventative measures for these issues?
Indeed, yes. So if you've got resistance bands and you know the term scapular setting, those are quite good. Yes, the proviso against that is please do not do that whilst you're actually at the wheel and driving. Your vehicle needs to be turned off and you need to be out of the driving seat. But yes, scapular control, scapular setting exercises are exercises that will help to strengthen the muscles in and around the shoulder blade area. When you have got a good strong upper back, so shoulder blade area, what that does is it helps to open out the chest. It brings in better air circulation and supply in with the gas exchange, and it helps to maintain a good upright posture. But what it also does is it significantly takes the load off the neck muscles, so you're less likely to develop things like fatigue, headaches, and migraines that can relate very much from the forward chin position that I was speaking about earlier. So yeah, good call on the resistance band and scapular setting, Dave.
Awesome. Yeah, he's sent a laughy cry face, I think, due to what we said about driving and doing his exercises at the same time.
Yeah, I didn't think you'd probably be doing it as you're driving, but I just suddenly realized that we do need to cover our backs in this day and age of medical legal cover situations.
Yeah, of course. I think what's interesting to me, or what makes me laugh, is that sometimes moving the driver's seat could be punishment worse than death for some drivers, because particularly when I used to run workshops, I'd occasionally get the odd call from a driver who'd be very upset that his seat got moved when the vehicle came in for service. Maybe he had a particularly tall technician or a particularly short technician having to move the seat forward or back to get to the pedals. And I'd get a phone call as sort of workshop manager, and they'd ring me up and go, they moved my seat, I told them not to move my seat, etc. So yeah, there might be a few who might be averse to that idea, but I think it's a great suggestion actually, because it does set you up just right to make sure that you're where you should be and got a good posture. So yeah, fantastic.
To be honest, I think that's some advice I need to follow as well, because I think even in my own domestic car, I don't have to share my car with anybody else, but on the odd occasion, if let's say my mother's come to visit and she drives my car, I don't know why she drives so close to the steering wheel, and it drives me absolutely potty. So I can commiserate with the other drivers when their seats have been moved. But to be fair, it is actually an incredibly useful technique, and it does take away a lot of the thinking process of when it is that my body's kind of like shifting into a fatigued position. I would push for it.
Awesome, thank you. One of the notes you put, one of the other effects that we haven't really talked about yet was like blood clotting and the chance of blood clotting.
Yes.
That's something that comes with prolonged sitting as well.
Yes, yeah, good pick up on that one, Pete. We haven't, as a nation, or as a world, we haven't had opportunity to travel in the last 18 odd months or so. But prior to that, people will probably remember there is a risk of things like blood clots with long haul flights, for example. People also will develop blood clots if they're sitting in a coach for long journeys, or in a train for long journeys. And in the same vein, excuse the pun, truck drivers who are doing long haul journeys are as much at risk as any of those other long haul journey makers in developing the risk of blood clots. There's another study. I'm just going to sort of look this one up here, because this is a really excellent study just to speak about. It was published in the American Journal of Industrial Medicine in 2014, and it was a study that has been funded and published by a group called NIOSH, which is the American National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health. And what they did was they interviewed close to 2,000 drivers, 1,670 drivers, and it was a massive study, partly funded by the US Department of Transport. So they have invested huge amounts in here. And what they found is that in truck drivers, long-haul truck drivers, there is a 69% level of obesity and 51% level of smoking amongst that population, which is double the average for the US working population. So that's really quite significant. And these figures are pretty much reflected upon what we see within the European drivers and the UK drivers as well. So things like hypertension or high blood pressure, truck drivers are running at 26% on that. Obesity, smoking, and high cholesterol, combined with little or no physical activity and potentially 6 fewer hours of sleep in a 24-hour period, all of these actually are very, very high risk factors for developing a variety of other issues, what we would call comorbidities. So blood clots go hand in hand with things like high blood pressure, cholesterol issues, lack of movement, obesity. So if a person happens to be running 2 or more of these few risk factors I've just mentioned, that actually puts them in a very high risk category for developing things like blood clots. Now, these blood clots might just be in the legs and are known as DVTs or deep vein thrombosis, can be very painful and actually do need attention. But if they get dislodged, it can actually lead to life-threatening conditions and can sort of lodge in the lung area and the heart area. So it is very important that we go forward and maintain the movements that we're going to talk about shortly, so some of the exercises as well. So you do want to limit your prolonged sitting.
Yeah, amazing. No, really, really interesting there. And I don't know if I've shared this with you before, Poonam, but I actually had pulmonary embolism. So I had blood clots in my lungs many years ago when I was quite poorly. I'd been treated with a clotting drug because I'd had a hemorrhage. And I can tell you now, drivers, it's the most painful thing. It's excruciating. Blood clots are really, really painful. And then the treatment's horrific as well because you get treated with warfarin, which is a blood thinning agent. And yeah, it's not a nice experience at all. And you know, when you're treated with warfarin, when you cut yourself, you just keep bleeding. You don't have a clot, and you know it's just not a nice situation at all, is it?
Yeah. No, the prevention side of things is so much better than the cure. And the majority of the things that we're talking about, to be honest, the main take-home message I really want to send across to the drivers as well as to probably the industry as a whole is that the factors that we're speaking about are entirely modifiable. So we don't have to have these high levels of risk running through. You know, there are lots of things that we can do to prevent these conditions from developing in individuals.
Of course. Okay, so should we just have a quick touch on nutrition then? Because nutrition is one of the other challenges around, you know, it's par for the course, isn't it? With long distance driving and poor accessibility to good quality food and good quality nutrition as well. Obviously, that then has a physical impact, doesn't it, Poonam?
Yes, it does. Yes. I mean, we've heard the adage of, you know, you are what you eat. And I suppose we are, as a global community, becoming much more aware of the quality of food that we eat, and you know, we're tending to buy more organic, free trade and free range and so on. Not so easy when you're on the road for hours on end. However, there are facilities, and it does require a little bit of planning and a little bit of forethought, but you would be able to potentially use the space in and around the cabin where you've got your cooking facilities as well to prepare decent meals for yourselves. It doesn't have to be, you know, a full banquet, but if a couple of simple meals that would work very, very well would be something like maybe having a few eggs. Eggs are great with protein, they digest reasonably well, and they will give you good filling power. So if you were to substitute something like maybe a burger for maybe a boiled egg as a snack, perhaps, that would actually be far more nutritionally healthy for you. You don't have the fats, you don't have the carbohydrates, and you don't have the stodginess that's going to lead to the mental fatigue coming through as much as you would if you were to have the protein-based egg. Other simple solutions that are really very, very easy to do would be to drink your water. Rather than the fizzy drinks and the sugary drinks, even if you were to substitute your sugary drinks for the sugar-free version, so for example, a pop rather than having a diet pop version, if you were to substitute those with just plain water, you would be far better off. The recommendation would be for you to have 8 liters of clear water in a day, and that's 8 liters. I do apologize, that's an awful lot. 8 glasses of 2 liters of water. In the summer, you want to top that up to at least 3 liters or 12 glasses.
I think this is kind of an age-old challenge for long distance drivers as well, isn't it? Because the challenge is that they don't want to go for the toilet. And they don't stop and what have you. So the tendency is to have the morning coffee and then to crack on, right? That is obviously that doesn't lend itself well. So it's timing those drinks and making sure the amount of liquid stay hydrated, because getting dehydrated will then create mental fatigue as well, right? So it's a vicious cycle, and I think
so an excellent way around that.
Yeah,
would be if you can have
just quickly. I just want to say about sort of this is why it's so important, and anyone listening who runs premises for drivers, if they're listening or if they catch up, so important. The HSE have put out about making sure that toilet stops are available, and people make them available for drivers, because it's been a big challenge in the sector around particularly with COVID as well. That people have not been given access to toilet facilities when they're at their stops, and that needs to change. Sorry,
that certainly doesn't. No. I think that's something I wasn't aware that there was that limitation. It's basically it's a denial of a human right, really, if you haven't got toilet facilities, really, isn't it? And I suppose that could open up a whole series of other discussions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I suppose especially if we're trying to encourage female drivers into the profession as well, I suppose it's even more of an issue to consider those needs, because it may be possible for part of the population in the trucking facility to maybe use facilities that women may not necessarily have. I'm not sure how to put that any more delicately.
I think that was very eloquent. So well done.
But what I was going to suggest, assuming that there are facilities at truck stops, a good way to do it will be to try, rather than having your teas and coffees as caffeinated drinks, see if you can have the decaffeinated versions in the first place, because they tend to have a slightly less diuretic, slightly less of draining effect than the caffeinated ones. Sip away at your water over the course of your drive. So is it 4 hours, Pete, and then there has to be an enforced stop?
Yeah, well, it depends on the vehicle operation as to how regularly they'll stop. But the EU driver's hours rules means it's 4.5 hours driving.
4.5, yeah. So probably for the first 1 to 2 hours, just sip away at the water, so that if you were to get through 1 liter in about in 2 hours, just in little sips, that's quite nice. That will get a low level, almost like a drip effect going into the body that will create a hydration. What you also want to do, separate to hydrating your body, is to get a flushing of the body going through. So when you are approximately half an hour away from your next truck stop that you're going to be able to use facilities of, that'll be a great time to then down another liter of water. So if you have 2 bottles in your cab with you, that would be fantastic. So the second bottle that you have, the second liter of water that you're drinking, will then be used very much as a flushing system. So when you get to your truck stop in half an hour, it would have gone through, it would have done the clearance, you'd be getting rid of the toxic buildup of chemicals that can create issues around your kidneys and around your bladder. And what you don't want when you're driving especially is to develop something like maybe a bladder infection, because then the desire and the need to stop and relieve the self is actually so much greater. And so if you just keep working on from a diuretic perspective and just keep flushing the body, you keep your kidney health and your bladder health as optimal as possible. It also goes hand in hand with mental health. So the more we drink, the better alertness we have. The more we drink of clear waters, the better mental health and alertness we do have.
Yeah, awesome. We're going to talk about mental health in a little bit. We're on to the third area now. So let's just talk a bit about headaches and glare off the road and lights and what sort of impact that can have. Poonam.
Okay, so the 2 separate issues here. You can get headaches from a variety of different reasons. Headaches is one of the areas that physiotherapists do specialize in. And a lot of headaches can actually be controlled by looking at the neck and the head position. So what I was speaking of earlier on, of trying to prevent that forward chin position and kind of like that slumpy position. That's going to do, if you can stay upright, you will actually take off a lot of strain from the back of the neck at the point where the neck and the head meet. If you reduce the pressure and the strain there, you will reduce a lot of the headaches that come up from the back of the neck, the tension type of headaches as well. So that'll be the first thing. So driver positioning can reduce your headaches. A second thing that can reduce generalized headaches is to make sure that your optical health, your vision, is good. So if you are like someone like myself needing to wear glasses, it would be a great idea to get checked out if you find that you are not able to focus either close up if you're reading material or further out, or even in between, because as we get older, our eyesight changes and we become more long-sighted, and so we might start to need to do things like use varifocal glasses and so on. So optical health can make a big difference to the level of headaches you get. There are certain smells that can trigger very severe headaches. So if you know that you are somebody who tends to react, let's say, to artificial fragrances, when you go to service stations and you go to the toilets and they've got those artificial fragrances in the toilets to try and keep the place smelling a little bit fresher, it might trigger a headache. So that's something that you just need to observe in your own health. And if you know that you're somebody who seems to get triggered every time you stop at services, it might be this artificial air refreshener things that they've got in there, in which case take 10-15 minutes outdoors in the open air, taking in a few nice lungfuls of oxygen into your body and kind of essentially flushing out the smells of the artificial stuff that you've put in. So those are three big things that will actually contribute significantly to headaches. Glare off the road or glare off like wet surfaces or cars coming at you, other trucks coming at you with bright lights, they can trigger headaches that are in the category of migraines. Again, they can be managed both with medication as well as using it's a certain filter that they can put on top of your glasses at the opticians, and so you can kind of like have like an anti-glare element, and some of these anti-glare coatings are much more efficient. So if you're somebody who is a long distance driver, you will automatically qualify to kind of have that higher level of anti-glare coating coming through. So definitely must speak to your opticians about it. Don't keep that from them.
Brilliant. Okay, so that's fantastic. So the fourth area was around just general mental health for drivers as well, obviously with long sustained periods potentially away from home, and job insecurities and what have you. Are you happy to just sort of explore that a bit more? Because I know it's something that's really important to you as well, Poonam.
Oh yes, yeah. Mental health is so vital, and I think more and more we're beginning to realize the value of good mental health. And then I was having a conversation with somebody recently, and they suggested that rather than using the term mental health, because that has connotations of I don't know, some sort of a stigma attached to it, what we should be thinking about is our mental well-being, our mental wellness. So we want to be in a state where we are well, not where we're trying to fight to gain health in an area. Physical health is one side, obviously. If we're down in our physical health, so if you've got things like the high blood pressure, we're not sleeping, we're not eating well, these will affect our mental health. So in order to get good mental wellness, we do need to be looking at our physical wellness. And I know we're going to cover exercises in a minute. But the other things that we do need to take account of, especially within the trucking fraternity, is that as drivers, you tend to spend long periods of time on the road in isolation. Yes, now we have things like, hands-free phones and so on, and you can make contact, but you're still pretty much on your own with a few people to speak with. And sometimes that might be useful, and other times you do need to talk to people. But you also are spending time away from your support systems, probably from your family. It might be that you've got somebody at home who's unwell or expecting a baby imminently, or, you've left your significant other doing all the homeschooling. Thank goodness that's ended. But, it puts a lot of pressure, and you're just thinking, yeah, I know he or she is just not coping as well because they just need to sleep and I'm on the road. And it can create an element of conflict. It is important that you speak with your work side of things, and from a work perspective, I'd hope that you would be compassionate to your drivers and understand what they're going through, because mental health and mental wellness are so important. And having prolonged periods of time on your own, it messes with your head, and it can create scenarios where you end up overthinking and becoming quite overwhelmed. And the flip side of that is if you have got things going on in the mind and you're preoccupied with that, how much attention is that driver honestly spending on the road? What is the risk of an accident potentially if perhaps mentally their head is somewhere else rather than on the job? And that's why I think it is so important that we have honest and open conversations between employer and employee without the sense of creating a label where the driver's made to feel I don't know what's the word I'm looking for, inferior or just not good enough for being not coping with what other people seem to be able to cope with. Mental health is individual. Mental wellness is an individual situation. So I think we need to look at those as individual categories, really. There was another bit, Pete. There was a bit about being on the road for a long time, and there was a second part to your question.
Yeah, so I think it's sort of around men's mental health in particular. But I think what you were saying around from a stigma point of view, I think it's so important. You know, obviously as a business, we offer mental health awareness training and sessions, and we also do it as part of the driver CPC. I think it's massively important to understand that is understanding mental health and reducing stigma is so vital. And I suppose we'll talk a bit more about men's mental health in particular, but it's getting men to be able to open up and be brutal and honest about how things are affecting and impacting them, and to be able to recognise that and be able to have a conversation with the employer, and the employer feels well equipped to be able to support a driver and make reasonable adjustments. I think it's vitally important, isn't it?
It is, and I think as well, times are changing, and I think men are. It is becoming far more acceptable to hear and to observe men having honest situations where they're saying, "I'm not coping so well. I'm not happy. I'm struggling." I'd like to hear more of these situations, because it's only when we're honest with ourselves about what we're feeling can we actually end up doing something about it. A lot of the time, women have been seen to be the whingers and the whiners. And it's, oh, here she goes again. She's always complaining about something or the other. But the truth of the matter is, as women, we tend to find other women we whinge to, we sort the world out, and then we go home. And so we create an external vent, essentially, for the buildup of the stuff that is just life. There are a lot of men, and especially if you're a truck driver and you don't have anyone to speak with, where you will internalize, capture everything inside, and it becomes a bit like a bottle that just gets shaken up, and you've just got this pressure within yourself, and eventually that comes out in a very negative manner. So if and when you do stop at, let's say, truck stops and so on, maybe it might be a nice idea to introduce a new change into the culture of drivers, where you, rather than just saying, "Hi, how you doing?" actually stop and listen to how the other person is actually doing. And if they say, "You know what, I'm struggling, feeling lonely, or I'm just tired of these long days, I want to be back at home, my partner's about to have a baby," whatever it might be, bring it out, let it out there. Even if the person doesn't receive it, at least you've let it out and it's not building up within you. If you are the hearer, perhaps a little bit of compassionate listening might go a long way. And even if all you were to say was, "Oh, I'm really sorry to hear you're struggling," even that acknowledgement will go a long, long way to making the first person feel that they matter, and that their words and their emotions actually will make a difference. So mental health is so important that we actually look after it. Yeah.
Definitely. I think it's vital that people feel listened to and understood. I think they're the key things, is that, and by raising awareness and by openly discussing, is the only way to shine a light, and it's the only way that we can seek to understand people and understand how things are. And I implore any employers or transport managers, I know there might be a few watching this or listening to this, it's so important to just understand. You don't have to have all the answers. This is the thing. You don't have to have all the answers. It's about seeking the correct help for people and supporting them in what they need to do. No one expects anyone to be an expert who's in the transport sector. It's about hearing people, understanding and helping. I think it's and being positive about the support that can be provided and how we can help people. So yeah, massively important. So yeah, thank you, Poonam. I think that's amazing. So, and the fifth area was around the need for regular MSK checkups. So if you're able to just sort of cover those off, please, Poonam, and then potentially, have you got any tips for what drivers can take away? What can transport managers take away to help their drivers with, from an exercise point of view as well?
Okay, so MSK tips, I would suggest the big takeaway is look at your sitting posture. You are going to be in a position where, unfortunately, I can't change your posture. You're going to need to sit. If you're working in an office, I'd be able to suggest alternatives, maybe standing, moving, walking about. But as a truck driver, there isn't any option. But you want to make sure that you follow the guidelines about how to position your chair in the most appropriate position. Go back to the instructions that you were given when you were a learner truck driver. Set your vehicle up in that manner again. Follow the advice from the Institute of Advanced Motorists and readjust your seats and your mirrors each and every time you get out. That will make a big difference to the loading that your body's going to go through. And I think as a driver, if you take responsibility for yourself in some of these things, then we can ask the employer to do other things. So as an employer, if you are in a position to look into the dampening effect of the vibrational forces that come through the seats and the steering columns, that will be fantastic. There are potentially, it might be a little bit of a financial investment. However, you almost need to do a bit of costings effect and just see, is it beneficial to put in the products that are going to prevent the vibrational force from coming through, or is it more beneficial to let the drivers suffer an injury? Contentious. I'll leave it out there. I'm a clinician, not a policy maker. So I would look at it from a clinician's perspective, because what I see, unfortunately, are the people who have been in a position where they have been exposed to a working environment for such a long period of time that they have now become set in the working patterns and set in the forces that the body's experience, whether that might be as a factory worker or a driver, or people who, pickers, people who work out in the field and pick vegetables, pick plants and so on. Our working positions and our working hours can actually make a difference to the pressures that we go through. So if we're going to be using the same muscles on a regular basis, you are going to get muscle fatigue. So if you were somebody, let's say a car mechanic, and you're working up underneath a car and you've got your arms up overhead and your head's up in this position, you're going to get neck strain, you're going to get shoulder strain, you're going to get back strain. If you're a hairdresser and you're working behind a person, you're kind of like working from above them this way, you are going to get neck strain, shoulder strain, wrist strain from using the hair dryers and so on. And in the same way, as a driver, you're probably going to get things like maybe a bit of wrist strain, especially if you're holding the steering wheel incorrectly. So if you have got your wrist slightly overly backward bent, that will give you a bit of a strain similar to a carpal tunnel. If you find that you are getting neck strains, head pains coming down into your shoulders, into your arms, most likely that is a neck or an upper back problem. If you pop in and see somebody like myself, I would be able to check you out, have a little look to see what's actually going on in the body, give you a correct diagnosis, and at the same time give you an individualized sort of treatment plan from a prevention perspective, as well as what we're going to do to correct it. So I think it was Dave who mentioned earlier on about the scapular setting exercises. That is one of the exercises that I give out very regularly for people who are working in a forward rolled position, hairdressers, physios, drivers. We're all working in that forward position. And so scapular setting is really important. If you were to participate in any other sports, however, it might be that you don't need the scapular work because you might already be nice and strong in the scapular area, but you might need core work going on. So even sitting actually will require your core to be nice and activated if you're sitting correctly. If you go into a slump position, you're not going to have a good walking core. You're not going to have good pelvic floor muscles. Men also have pelvic floor muscles, and men also develop issues like incontinence, from a poorly working core and poorly working pelvic floor area. So if you're a driver and you're sitting for long hours, there is a risk of obesity, high blood pressure, and all these other things we've said about. There's also a risk of developing issues to do with genital health, which nobody really wants. So if you just sit well, you're going to prevent a whole host of other problems. When you do stop for your either your shorter truck stops, your mandatory ones, or if you're stopping overnight to actually sleep, what would be fantastic is if you can actually start to develop a routine of exercising, and something simple like maybe just going for a run around a local block would be great. Doing things like press-ups, sit-ups, plank-based exercises. These can all be done in a very small space. You can do it in your cabs. So if the weather's atrocious outside, you can still do an awful lot of work in a static environment. Squat-based exercises, again, very, very powerful and excellent for what we call your posterior chain. So that's your muscles of your back, your muscles of your bum area, your gluteal area, muscles of your hamstrings. These are really important in helping us to stay erect and vertical, so that we can actually walk without straining our core muscles. If you could maybe hook on a bicycle, maybe onto the back of your truck somewhere, rather than going out for a run, if you're not a runner, you could just take your bike out and go for a bit of a spin at the end of your driving day, so that you're moving your legs, moving the blood, getting air into those lungs, helping with your cardiovascular health and helping with your mental health at the same time. If you are neither a cyclist nor a runner, well, there's nothing to stop you from going out for a walk. Go for a power walk, get a pair of maybe ankle weights that you just Velcro onto your ankles, or maybe 2 little water bottles in your hands, and that'll become, a little bit of a weight, and power your way down for about 1 kilometer or so. It'll only take you about 20 minutes, if that. 20 minutes if you're walking really slowly, but if you're going to be powering, it'll only take you 15 minutes or so. Back into the cab, have a nice healthy meal, and rest up, sleep well. And those should reduce an awful lot of the musculoskeletal injuries. On that note, your sleeping position is also important. So if you are sleeping with your neck very highly cranked up, if you've got too many pillows or very firm pillows, that's not the greatest of ideas. And again, if you were to speak with somebody like myself or another physio, we'll be able to tailor and suggest what height of pillows you would need. Some people have a false understanding that what you need is a flat bed as hard as you possibly can and only one pillow in order to keep spine health going. It's not entirely true, because some people actually do need a much softer, much more supportive mattress, and some people will need several pillows to support the head in the position that it is correct for their bodies. So it's not a case of one size fits all. And if you find that you sleep better in your cab than you do at home, it might be a mattress pillow kind of issue. And it might be, if you mimic what you've got in your cab, it might help you at home, and vice versa.
Brilliant. Poonam, I think that's been absolutely fantastic and so helpful. I think there's been some amazing tips there for people to take away with. So thank you so much.
No, you're very welcome.
We've covered everything, I think. So all that's left to do, Poonam, just for those that have joined us more recently or a bit later on the call, you're able to just reintroduce yourself, where people can find you, whether it's on LinkedIn or Facebook, what your company name is, and then we'll wrap it up, Poonam.
That's fantastic. Yes, thank you. So it has been an absolute pleasure to speak with everybody. And I'm very, very passionate about helping people to understand what they can do to look after their bodies and their health. At the end of the day, it is your health. It's your body. It's not mine. So there's no point in me holding all the information. So if you've got any questions, by all means, please feel free. Get in touch with Pete, who'll pass the information on to me, or directly get in touch with myself. My name is Poonam. I am the owner and the director of Peak Health Clinics. This is a clinic based in Peterborough in Cambridgeshire, just literally minutes off the A1 at Junction 17. And I provide solutions based in physiotherapy, acupuncture, health, and wellness. The concept about getting people to the peak of their health is extremely important. And I will look at the holistic body. So I will look at the physical health as well as mental, emotional, and psychological health and so on, because all of those together will make a difference. So if you've got any questions relating to either the driver work that we've just covered or anything else, if you've got, let's say, I don't know, sprained knee, for example, that's going to limit your ability to depress your accelerator, depress your brakes and such like. So your entire body can be directly affected. It doesn't have to be just neck and shoulders area as a driver. Speak with me. I do run clinics on a daily basis, and I don't have a waiting list at all. So if you do want to get checked over before your next long drive, or in between, you've got, like I said, Peterborough services just minutes away from my clinic, you'd be more than welcome to stop by, get a check over. I think the take-home message for the MDs of the trucking companies is to realize that a lot of the factors we've spoken about are modifiable. They don't all have to have a cost implication, but they do need to have a listening ear. And I think if you were to start to listen with a bit of compassion to the individual situations that the drivers have, you'd be able to help them. As drivers, if you were to listen with compassion about the restrictions that your employer has, you would also be able to work together. And I think teamwork really makes the dream work. Listen to what your bodies are saying. Listen to what your health is saying to you. And if you feel that you're getting to the point where life's just getting a bit too much, talk to somebody. talk to anybody that you can, whether that might be your significant others in your family, whether that might be people within the trucking fraternity when you stop at the stops, whether that might be your GPs. They are a good source of information and help, but there are other facilities around. There's Samaritans. There are so many organizations that can help. So if you don't know who to reach out to, I'm always here, and I think Pete's always there as well. We are here to help you out.
Poonam, fantastic, thank you, and such great advice as well. So yeah, I hope everyone's enjoyed it. Do tune in to the podcast and share it with people if you think it's going to be useful for them. That'd be amazing, and really pleased to have you on. And once again, thank you very much, and take care, everyone. See you all.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you so much. I know.
I really hope you loved today's episode, and if you did, please make sure you subscribe and listen out for future episodes too. Please do share it across your social media channels. We hope to reach more and help more people. If you want to find out more about me, my name's Pete Rushmer. You'll find me across any social media channel and my business Flagship Partners, and we're your partners in success across your business. Thank you. See you again soon.